Today we are back with another historical research quiz stream. My door's open. One sec. Pardon. Pardon me, ladies and gentlemen. We are back in frame. Today we are back. It is Wednesday, a little bit later than usual. We tend to start these around 6:30 p.m. But your boy's been busy. Your boy has been busy for the past couple days working on some content and announcement information for the USA 250 Digital Impact Network, which is launching on July 4th with a series of lead up streams through the entire month of June, one a week, every single Tuesday. First one coming up next week. So get in touch for that. But yeah, so it's just been really busy. If you can't tell by my eyes, I'm exhausted, man. I'm exhausted. I'm very tired. But it's okay. It's not that big of a problem. We'll figure it out, right? We always do. Anyway, first things first, we're gonna quickly publish the first we're gonna check how our RAM's doing. By the way, I want to come on here and just give a major shout out to the 32 gigabyte RAM upgrade I had completed or done to my PC because chef's kiss, my PC runs so much better than it did before. I currently have probably 20 to 30 Google Chrome tabs open. I have OBS open. I have NVIDIA Broadcast open. I have Rumble Studio separately open in a different tab. I have the stuff I need for this stream today running, and my memory is only at 47% in this given moment. Now, before the RAM upgrades, so rewind the time maybe like a lot, couple days. No, we'll be safe. We'll go a week. I was using bare minimum 98% of my memory all fucking day, every day. Guys, I need to stop saying fuck so much. Not because it's a problem on Rumble, just because it's apparently my favorite word. I had no idea, but I'll be watching back golf streams, history streams, gaming streams, and just mildly listening to myself throughout the day, and I'm just spamming the bomb. Fuck, like nonstop. Like I gotta chill out, like at least a little bit, you know? So that's that. I have to make sure all my tabs are still open. One of the things I hate the most on this planet is losing a package of Chrome tabs. So you know how whenever you exit out of Chrome and you have like 5+ tabs open, if you go look at your Chrome history, it says like restore tabs, like restore 7 tabs or X number tabs, and you can bring them all back. That's my number one best friend. I love that thing. But sometimes if you close a grouping of tabs and you lose a bunch of tabs at once, and you search something on a separate, Google search afterwards, you crowd the search history and you lose the grouping of tabs. Well, I have a little bit of a hack for that as well. I recently figured this out. If you lose a grouping of tabs in Chrome and you bury it, that's how you lose it, is you bury it with other Google searches. You just go and individually delete, let's say like 5 of your most recent history searches in your history, and it will result in the grouping relocating into recent history. Because when you open up the full history, the groupings are never there. You don't get groupings in the full history. Only in the short-term little terminal, the pop-up history, can you get groupings. So if you delete recent searches, boom, your groupings are back. That saved my ass big time. So I was quite happy about that. I'm excited to share that with you all. I'm not gonna lie. But anywho, we're gonna make our posts. We're live. Let everybody know. Hopefully, I think we need one more chatter this month. Yeah, yeah, buddy. Oh man, I just closed out Rumble and I need the video title for the X post. Rookie mistake. Rookie mistake. Anyways, if anybody's funneling in, let me know how you're doing, what you're doing. We're going to go through this. Today, I have a long episode, low key. Like, this is the longest, like, doc, bullet points. Not the most amount of pictures, but still a good amount of pictures. I think we have at least 10. And yeah, this is going to be a longer episode. Plus, I have to do a little bit more streaming for this month. So once I'm done with this stream, not this stream, like this segment of the stream, like the historical research quest, I think we're just gonna hang out for a little bit. I plan for maybe like an extra 30 minutes, either play some GeoGuessr, play some chess. I don't know, just something to kick a little time going. And stay tuned because this weekend we have until the 31st, so I have 5 days. What is that? 31st is Sunday. I have So probably on Sunday, we're gonna do a nice little bulky um Rumble premium exclusive stream, which should be pretty exciting. We'll figure out what we'll do for that. Definitely some gaming, probably some case openings, and a lot of chilling, a lot of talking, a lot of hanging out with you guys if you're around. So I'm excited for that. That should be fun. But let me get this post up so I can finally. For that, that should be fun. There we go. But for our stream, we are live on Rumble. What should I say? Should I say come hang, come chat? Oh, we're just going to leave it at that. You know what? You don't got to go too over the top. Sometimes you can just relax and chill a bit, you know? It's sometimes less is more. Less is more every now and then. Hey, look, over on X, we already got some likes on the stream. That is hype. Who do we have here? Okay, that is definitely an OnlyFans chick. Or like, you know, an OnlyFans bot or whatever. Let's see. All right, all right, all right, all right. Okay, we're all good. We're all good. Now, that's that. Let me bring up. Yes, it worked. Worked right away. Worked right away. Worked right away. Oh, we got a fresh cut today, ladies and gentlemen. Check out the little fade. You know, we still got a little bit of hair. We go with the four on the top. Now, from this angle on the camera, it's really rough because it looks like a bald cap or like some sort of a like skin cap, but I swear it's just the lighting. In person, it's a nice drop fade from the mid. And yeah, we're hanging out. These pictures, I'm doing them a bit different today. I put them all on a Google Doc for easy scrolling, less clicking, more just chilling, you know? Um, we're going to give people a couple seconds to pop in here. I'm going to check on the streams in the other location. If anybody's hanging out, let me know how you're doing. It is Wednesday, so we're coming up on the weekend, which is exciting. And I am ready to dive into today's story soon because honestly, these history streams are a lot of fun for me. I learn a lot. I refresh a lot. I like the opportunity of potentially other people learning something, and it's a good time. So I was scrolling over here earlier, looking at what I wanted to do after the history segment of the stream, just to pass a little time, and chess randomly popped up. I used to play chess like a bunch online in college, so not like that long ago. A couple of years ago, I started heavily into it, and I was playing like in class, and I was tearing up. No, I'm not good. I'm not good, but I was just playing so much. It was a good time, a lot of fun. Um, yeah. Oh, it's 9 p.m. We've already been live for 10 minutes. Are you kidding me? 9 minutes, 30 seconds? What? Time passes so fast on these streams specifically, even though as of recent, the gaming streams have been absolutely flying by too. We went through like 3.5 hours last time, like that, super quick. I don't know what you guys think. I changed up the positioning of my camera. Um, I moved it over to the right this time, like as you look at the screen. I don't know if I like it because it also forced me to move my mic over to that side just to look more like, I'm facing inwards. I'm gonna take the light out. Um So yeah, that's what we did. But oh, I haven't even mentioned what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about the Black Death, Europe's deadliest plague. But we'll get into that in just a second. I realized why I brought my phone up. It was to check the stream on other locations. Perfect. Let's see the quality. The image quality is not that great with this white background, at least on the cellular device. There we go. Yeah, so our last couple streams, our last Counter-Strike stream was 3 hours long. The one before that was 4 hours, 23 minutes long. The Pompeii stream, which was last week, Historical Research Quest, was an hour long. We had our 9-hole IRL golf stream, which was an hour 30. We had golf practice, which was 2 hours and 15. Yeah, so really with these historical research quests, we've been hitting that 1 hour mark, like right on the head. 59 minutes, 58 minutes, 59 minutes. What about the one before? 1 hour, 10 minutes. And then the Bitcoin one hit 47 minutes. That one was quite short, but it's because it's not less information available, but it's just sort of easier to breeze through that, honestly, to be honest. Yeah. Anyway, like I said, today's topic of discussion and learning and informing is the Black Death, which is Europe's deadliest plague. Okay. So we're gonna get this started right here. It's 9:02. We're gonna kick things off. I should probably stiffen out the back of the chair so I'm not wobbling and leaning everywhere. Fixing the shirt, getting all nice and close. Yeah, we're doing good. Okay, so hey everybody, and welcome back to another historical research quest stream. I am your host, the lovely, the fantastic. Oh, guys, please stop. I don't need any more congratulations or um, praise. But I am your host, Leon Horvath, from the wonderful NAG, launching USA 250 Digital Impact Network July 4th, 2026. So if you want more information on that, you want to read the white paper, you want to know what we're doing, you want to talk to me, you want to be involved in the streams, you want to get your foot somehow involved in this launch, please message me directly, DM me directly. We can get on a call. We can talk about how we can work out a way for you to get involved in this launch, because I'm trying to activate as much of my network as humanly possible. And once you read the white paper, you'll understand exactly why I'm saying just that. But tonight we are stepping into one of the darkest and most world-changing events in human history, the Black Death. This was far from just a disease outbreak. It was a civilization shock. Like, this was a massive shock to all of civilization throughout Europe. Between roughly 1347 and 1351, Europe was struck by a plague pandemic so severe that entire communities disappeared, governments struggled to function, farms were abandoned, graveyards absolutely overflowed, and ordinary people watched as the world they understood completely collapsed around them. So just to get an understanding of what this, like, before we get into the details, the bulk of the information here, think COVID. So we experienced COVID. Let's try to relate off the jump to something that we hear: pandemic. You hear pandemic and your mind should immediately jump to COVID. It's your personal experience. You lived through it, unless you're under like 2 years old or 3 years old or 4 years old or whatever it is. The Black Death, just by this first little bit I told you, graveyards overflowing, farms abandoned, yada ying, yada yung, it was devastating, levels beyond. Okay, so think about your COVID experience. Think about living through that. Think about just purely existing in that time while you're taking in the information about the Black Death here that we're going to be talking about. So when we hear numbers like 25 million or 50 million dead, those figures can become like almost too large to feel, if you know what I'm saying. But for medieval people, this was not a statistic, like, at all. It was a father who did not come home. Deadass. It was a mother suddenly gone. It was a child sick in bed. It was a priest overwhelmed by funerals. It was a market that stopped opening. It was a village field that no one plowed because the family that worked on it had died. The Black Death was not experienced as a chapter in a book. It was experienced as an emergency inside homes, churches, ports, farms, monasteries, city streets, whatever you could think about when it comes to civilization and day to day operations. So we can definitely draw some parallels there between our COVID experience and this. Like, this feels semi normal. Like, we are breaking down this information at a much different level and in a completely different way than we would have 7, 8 years ago pre-COVID, of course. Like, the relatability that you're gonna feel throughout this sort of series or this lesson today, it's gonna feel uneasy and it might be uncomfortable at times because as I was crafting this and I was thinking about what I'm gonna be talking about, I was relating. Like, you find yourself relating and it's so long ago. Like, we're talking 1300s, 14 like 1300s, baby. And the level of relatability, it's like if you read this to someone 7 years ago, they would be like, that could never happen today. Yet it did. We lived through it. The same thing. Homes, churches, ports, farms, markets, city streets, everything was gone. Everything was shut down in our lifetime just 6 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago. And it's ridiculous to think about. So I really urge you to keep that in mind as we keep talking here. Tonight, we're going to walk through the story super, super carefully. We will start before the plague actually arrives because Europe did not face this disaster from a position of strength. Okay. We will look at daily life, trade, hunger, sanitation, religion, medicine, and the fragile social order of the 1300s. Then we're going to follow the disease from Central Asia and the Black Sea all the way into Mediterranean ports. We will track its spread across Europe. We will talk about symptoms, mass graves, fear, religious panic, scapegoating, art consequences or art literature, economic change, public health, and the long term, like health consequences and consequences, period, that helped push Europe away from the medieval world and toward the Renaissance. Okay. This topic is heavy, of course, but it is incredibly important because it shows how one biological event can change the course of culture, economics, religion, government, and even art, and even social science, and everything in between. It's incredibly impactful. And we know that once again through our own existence and experiences just in the last decade. It's crazy. Before we talk about the ships and death carts, though, I want us to begin with the world that existed before the disaster. So we're going to start by rewinding or going in front of the actual plague itself a little bit. All right. So let me get this up here. All right. So imagine Europe in the early 1300s. Most people lived in villages. Their lives followed the seasons. Spring was planting, summer was labor, autumn was harvest, and winter was sheer survival. Church bells marked time. The local lord controlled land. The church shaped belief. Kings and nobles fought wars, collected taxes, and claimed authority. But for most ordinary people, life was intensely local. Like, there's a tiny, tiny group here. Tiny, tiny group. Europe had grown in population across previous centuries. Okay, so it had grown a little bit, but still intensely ultra local. Okay, more land was cultivated, more towns expanded, more trade routes linked regions together. Cities like Florence, Venice, Genoa, Paris, Bruges, and London were full of merchants, guilds, apprentices, servants, clergy, students, and travelers. Like, society was or had grown, professions were expanding, experiences were diversifying, and the streets were full. There was plenty to do. There was plenty of people around, and this was sort of life before the Black Death came up here. So that growth brought wealth and opportunity, of course, same as today. Every time a new sector opens up, more money, more power, more influence. The same thing happened back in the day. The growth of of society, period, and everything around it, the infrastructure and the individuals brought wealth and opportunity, but it also brought overcrowding and vulnerability, of course. There's strengths in numbers, but more of them fall, or the the harder they fall, the higher they go, the higher they go, the harder they fall, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? But in big groups, there's positives and there's negatives. And the negatives are really going to be under a spotlight here in this stream today. Medieval streets were not clean. Not clean. So many people, no laws, no none of that shit. Well, there were rules, but I don't know if necessarily laws. Um, Waste ran through gutters. Okay. Animals moved through towns, grain attracted rats, ships carried rats, storehouses sheltered rats. People lived close together with absolutely no germ theory, no antibiotics, and no knowledge of microplastic bacteria or microscopic bacteria. What's interesting here is I think back to time before COVID, or our experience in COVID, and there were so many people that didn't wash their hands like regularly. Like I wouldn't say I never washed my hands, but washing my hands wasn't like a, oh, I just did this, I need to go wash my hands like right now. Now, I wash my hands at least 6 times a day with soap, with water. I My hands being clean ever since COVID, for some reason, it's just like, well, it was trained into us. They always told us, wash your hands, wash your hands. So I was washing my hands a bunch because you were forced to wash your hands. It was either a hand sanitizer squirt or a hand under or a faucet, your hands under the faucet, and you had to wash your hands before doing anything, especially eating or anything like that. And now it's just like second nature to me. Like, I want my hands to be clean. Like, I'm actively always thinking about my hands being clean now. If I feel a slight stick or a speck of dirt or something on my hands, it's immediately warm water, soap, wash. I'm not kidding, at least 6 times a day, bare minimum. Back before COVID, I would wash my hands, but I wouldn't think about washing my hands. I'd be like, "Oh, I should probably wash my hands. It's been a little bit." But now I'm proactively just like, "Let me wash my hands real quick. Let me keep these hands clean, boy." So think about that. I'm sure so many people could relate to that. But that was the mindset, obviously, before the Black Death came in Europe. There was no, like, sanitation wasn't like a thought in anybody's brain. There was much bigger, much more clear problems in their mind. And that's the, like, if you died to sickness, you died to sickness. Like, yeah, that was luck of the draw. Like, prevention and the knowledge of microscopic bacteria was just non-existent, to be honest. People, okay, we say that, but people weren't like unintelligent, all right? Obviously. They observed patterns, they tried to explain what they saw, but they explained disease through the knowledge systems available to them. All right. So you got to really dumb these things down when we're trying to put ourselves in their shoes here. To them, bad air. These were like the disease knowledge systems that ran through their brain. Okay. First we have bad air, then we have divine punishment, imbalance in the body, unlucky stars, or moral corruption. So, not very scientific, okay? Doctors might consult urine, recommend bloodletting, prescribe herbs, or study astrological charts. I know a lot of people who do that nowadays. Priests might call for prayer, confession, and repentance, but no one understood that a tiny bacterium carried by fleas could travel through rats, ships, warehouses, and of course, human communities. Like, it was a lot of like the holistic shit. It was all holistic. All right. They didn't have a scientific understanding of health in the slightest. It was just like, yo, bro, I'll pray for you. You're sick. It wasn't even like, don't get anywhere near me. It was like, oh, you're sick. You must have done something fucked up, boy. Like, we could make out right now and I won't get sick because I didn't do anything wrong, you know? So that's the vibe. Like, disease, the spread of disease was completely, it was like speaking gibberish to them, but obviously no one spoke about that to them. So here we're gonna, well, we already have the first picture up behind me here. But this picture shows like medieval agricultural life before the plague, peasants cutting and gathering hay, workers moving through fields, and a powerful city skyline in the background. This is like the rhythm of normal life: labor, land, food, seasons, and social order before disease shattered this routine. Um, Very, very, very similar to like a farm life, farm mixed with city life today, to be honest. Okay. But look at this image for a moment. Just for a moment, take a closer look at this image. It is peaceful, organized, and almost beautiful. Like it is beautiful in a way. Look, the grass is green, beautiful colors, um, beautiful real estate. I mean, imagine someone with, I mean, that could be a nice crib right there. But that's like a whole. That's what I mean by everybody was so localized. Was like they're all within the square there. Um, But this, like, peaceful, organized, and almost beautiful life that you're visioning here is what makes this story so powerful. Catastrophe does not usually announce itself in advance. We all know that. It just shows up when you're least expecting it. People are working, eating, arguing, worshiping, raising children, paying rents, planting crops, and preparing for the next season. They do not know that a pathogen moving across trade networks is about to enter their world and just completely fu- mess them up. Okay. That is the first big lesson of the Black Death. Societies are often most vulnerable in places where they believe they are the strongest. Trade made Europe wealthier, but also connected ports and cities in ways that, that helped infection move. So with the good, there is always the bad. It's just you don't always recognize or realize what that bad is, especially when on a scientific level, you have no idea what an infection is, what bacteria is, how it spreads, how it can spread, anything. You're just thinking, oh man, these guys are bringing in bags of potatoes on the ships, man. And you're hyped for your potatoes, bro, because you could make pizza with your boy Johnny, but you don't know that that potato had a pathogen that was coming to destroy your entire society. Population growth made towns larger, but it also made them more crowded, as we like talked about earlier. Religious unity gave people meaning, but when prayers did not stop the plague, that same religious worldview was like shaken. Feudalism organized labor, but when millions died, labor became scarce and the old hierarchy began to crack. So before the plague was a medical disaster, it was a systems disaster. Food systems were fragile, cities were dirty, travel routes were active, medicine was limited, belief systems were intense, and no one could see the real enemy. Now we need to zoom out from the village, though, and move east toward like Central Asia, the Mongol world, the Black Sea, and trade routes that carried the disease toward Europe. So this didn't come from Europe. This is like Trump being like, China, it's China did it. Except here, we know that Central Asia, Mongol world, Black Sea, the trade routes moving into Europe was what infected the people of Europe and brought the Black Death with them. Another detail worth emphasizing, I think, though, is how narrow the margin of survival could be in this society. Okay. A bad harvest did not just mean inconvenience, it could mean hunger through an entire winter. A sick animal could reduce a family's food supply. A damaged tool could slow down harvest completely. A new tax could force a peasant household to sell grain if needed for itself. So when we describe pre plague Europe as growing, we should not mistake growing for security in the slightest. Okay. It was crowded in a productive world, but it was also a world where many people lived close to the edge. So, what a great example for that I would like to bring up is people living paycheck to paycheck today. A lot of people in this world today, if you walked up to them and you said, if you lost your job right now and you weren't guaranteed a paycheck next week, what would happen to you? A lot of people would say, I'd go hungry. I'd lose my apartment. I'd lose my phone. I'd lose everything that makes me who I am and operate the way I am on a day to day basis. I could lose that in a 1 week or 1 month, whatever the grace periods are for billings. Think about that here in pre plague Europe, but it's their life, like their lives. For them, it's not one paycheck. For them, It's one goat. For them, it's one broken hammer or whatever it might be. But you get the point. Similar to the paycheck to paycheck argument we use today, they knew nothing. Their brains were small, not actually, but they just didn't have information, the knowledge in pre-plague Europe. And their life, they were hanging on by an edge, just like so many people are today. So there is more connections to be made there to modern life. Um, that specifically matters because disease does not strike all bodies equally. Malnutrition, exhaustion, cold, previous illness, and poverty can make people a lot more vulnerable, as you know. I want to. I think my mic might be a little too loud. I'm gonna turn it down. Yes, so like malnutrition, exhaustion, cold. Obviously, this can all make people more susceptible and vulnerable. Um, to these illnesses. A wealthy merchant in a city, of course, had better food, more space, and more options than a poor laborer, but even wealth could not guarantee safety. It could buy you a little bit of wiggle room, potentially, depending on your resources, your health history, and the way you live your life. But there is no guarantee that just because you got money, just because you're the king, just because you run everything in this bitch, that you're going to be safe. The plague crossed class lines. Still, the poor often face the worst conditions, of course, because they started off at a lower level. Crowded housing, dirtier neighborhoods, weaker diets, and less ability to flee. When the plague arrived, inequality shaped the experience of disaster, even though the disease itself could easily kill anyone. The medieval village was also a network of obligations. Like people relied on each other. People were not isolated individuals in the slightest. Now, this is something where it's very different to today. People love to be isolated. If isolationism is a word, then everyone in the world would be isolationists if they wanted to today. Not actually hyperbole, but still. But still, like I know me, I love my alone time. I love being alone. My favorite quote of all time by Jean-Paul Sartre. Jean-Paul Sartre is, if you're lonely when you're alone, you're in bad company. Now, these people really didn't know what it was like to be alone. They obviously had families, but they had real life obligations to one another as a community, not just within a family, not just going to church. It was, hey, in order for us to operate and actually be chill in here, we need everybody to put in their fair share of work. That's how it operated. That's how it worked. Um, they depended on one another for harvest labor, animal care, food exchange, child care, repairs, worship, and protection. When plague killed a few people, grief followed. But you don't have too long to dwell on that. When it killed dozens, the community's basic functions began to fail entirely. Who bakes? Who harvests? Who tends the animals? Who watches children? Who carries water? Who buries the dead? Those questions turned the Black Death, from a medical emergency into a total social, societal, town-wide, citywide, countrywide emergency, continent-wide emergency. Okay, but now we move towards the origins in Asia and the route toward Europe. Okay, so to understand the Black Death, we have to understand that the disease did not begin as a European problem. All right, let's get that straight. The bacterium behind the pandemic, Yersinia pestis, existed in rodent populations across parts of Eurasia long before the 14th century. In the right ecological setting, a plague can persist among wild rodents. It does not need human cities to exist. It just helps it spread. But for plague to become a world-changing pandemic, it needs movement. Animals, fleas, people, merchants, armies, and ships. So in order for it to become a world-changing pandemic, the bacteria, the problem combination, or the problem factor, it has to be able to move, connect dots. I'm here, I get you 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 here. Sooner or later, the spread is obviously exponential. We know how that works. And you have the entire globe or entire continent or entire house or entire state, no matter the scale, in the palm of this This beast. Let's call it a beast. So the 13th and 14th centuries were an age of major movement across Eurasia. The Mongol Empire had connected large parts of Asia and Europe through conquest, diplomacy, tribute, trade, and communication. This created conditions sometimes described as the Pax Mongolica, a period in which long distance trade routes became more active and integrated. Goods moved, people moved, letters moved, luxury items moved, ideas moved, but disease, of course, also moved. The good was more resources, more connections, more food, more diversity, more people. The bad was more disease and more opportunity for it to flourish and fly wherever it wanted to go. This is one of the oldest patterns in history. Connections bring opportunity and danger at the same time, just like I've been saying. The same networks that carry silk, spices, metal, grain, paper, and money can also carry the pathogens. The plague likely moved westward through Central Asia and Black Sea networks before reaching the edge of Europe. And one of the key locations in the traditional story is Kaffa, a Genoese controlled trading port in Crimea on the Black Sea. So in 1346, Mongol forces were besieging Kaffa. A famous account says that plague broke out in the Mongol camp and that the besieging army catapulted infected corpses over the city walls. So literally, pack them in a catapult. You see this wall right here? Oh, wait. 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 See this wall right here? So in Kaffa, when people got infected with Black Death and they died, the besieging army would put them in a catapult right here and fling them over the wall out over to this region, even though that's not what the map is about. Just wanted to give you a little bit of a visual. Um, The story is dramatic, and historians still debate how literally we should take it. It may be partly exaggerated, it may have been shaped by fear and later retelling, but even if the catapult story is not perfectly reliable, I think it is. I could totally see people doing that back in the day. The larger point remains clear. Plague was present around the Black Sea, and ships connected the region to the Mediterranean world. So it came from Kaffa. Genoese merchants fled Kaffa by ship, but they did not only carry themselves and their cargo. Ships carried rats, rats carried fleas, fleas could carry Yersinia pestes. Um, and when infected rats died, hungry fleas searched for new hosts. So they bit other rats, sailors, dock workers, and eventually city residents. You see how this spread really starts to shape up and just absolutely widen the scales of this rapidly spreading disease. So the ship itself became a moving bridge between infected zones and new populations for the Yersinia pestis to move. By late 1347, plague ships had reached Sicily, so especially the port of Messina. Imagine this scene though: ships arriving from the east, sailors sick or dying, rumors spreading across the docks, officials trying to decide whether to allow cargo off the ships or not, merchants worried about profit and survival, families waiting for men who may never return. The people of Messina did not know they were standing at one of the turning points of European history. You know how just like mind-bogglingly confusing that has to be? People have to make money. People want to stay safe. People have zero scientific knowledge about what's going on. They just see bodies dropping. They see it's probably happening from the supplies, but they need their supplies because they're one missed shipment away from death themselves. So obviously you're going to risk it. Let the cargo off the ship. Give me my shit. Hopefully I survive. Hopefully my family survives. If not, we need this either way or not. Okay? So that's sort of the reality of the situation there. It was an ultra confusing time, especially on these shipyards and just in these cities overall. Let me make sure I get you guys a good setup for this picture. So this harbor image shows Messina as a busy port city with ships in the water and the city spread along the coast. You can sort of explain here why the ports were so dangerous. So ships, sailors, cargo, warehouses, rats, fleas, and crowds. all came together in this one place. Everybody, everything, every item, every animal, every person, um, every bit of supplies, everything crossed through here. It was the chokehold or the choke point. So once these fleas entered, once the disease entered, once it's caught onto the first little victim from here, it was mass spread chaos. Of course it was. A port is a doorway. In normal times, that doorway brings wealth. It brings spices, cloth, grain, information, travelers, and opportunity, of course. During a pandemic, that doorway becomes a point of entry for death. Very different. Messina was not isolated. It was tied to the Mediterranean. From Sicily, ships and travelers could move to Genoa, Venice, Pisa, Marseille, and other coastal cities. Those cities were not endpoints. They were just like hubs, trade hubs. Once plague entered them, it could move inland by road, river, and market networks. Okay? So once the disease hits the land through the port cities, the move inward is like clockwork. And that's exactly why the Black Death spread so quickly. It did not need to march like an army. It used the routes Europe had already built for commerce and communication. It moved with sailors. It moved with goods. It moved with refugees. It moved with fear. When people heard plague had reached a nearby city, many fled. That decision was understandable, of course, but movement would only spread it more. Movement could spread the infection further, especially if people were already exposed or if rats and fleas moved with them or any of the supplies they were taking with them. At first, communities often did not know what they were facing. Was it poisoned air? Was it divine punishment? Was it an Eastern disease? Was it caused by outsiders? Was it the result of a sin? In a world without modern epidemiology, epidemiology, the first stage of a pandemic was just utter confusion, which is the same case as for us today, of course. Then came dread. Then came death on a scale that shattered ordinary routines. Okay, so simple enough, right? The spread across Europe is what we're going to talk about next. So now let us follow the plague across Europe. Late 1347 is the first major turning point in the European outbreak. The disease reaches Sicily, then moves into mainland Italy and other Mediterranean ports. Genoa and Venice, two of the great maritime powers, were especially vulnerable because their wealth depended on ships and trade. The very systems that made them rich were exactly what exposed them to infection. By 1348, plague was spreading through Italy, France, and Spain. Florence was hit with terrifying force. So was Marseille. The disease reached Avignon, where the papal court was located during this period. That is important because it shows that spiritual authority did not provide physical protection. Even the center of church power in Western Europe could not escape. And imagine what that was like for these individuals, the common people of the city, seeing that. The highest of power at the church could not escape this infection. They knew damn well they couldn't either at that point. In France, the plague moved through major urban centers and along trade routes. Paris suffered heavily. In England, the plague arrived in 1348, likely through southern ports and then moved toward London and the countryside. By 1349, England, Wales, Scotland, the Low Countries, and many German speaking regions were suffering. The disease continued north into Scandinavia and east toward the Baltic and Russia. By the early 1350s, the first great wave had touched much of Europe. This is just 13 short years. Oh, wait. Let me double check that. I don't want to say anything stupid. Level impossible. Sorry, guys. Just exhausted. But I love this lesson. I'm very, 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 very happy to be talking. I don't know why I said 1337. I don't know why I said 13 years. Please disregard that. Um The disease continued within Scandinavia and east toward the Baltic and Russia. Yes. So the speed mattered. People were used to local disasters, like a bad harvest, a war, a flood, a village fire. But this was completely different. News came from far away, then closer again. First, it was in Sicily, then it was in Italy, then France, then the next town, then the next street, then the next house. The psychological experience of waiting for the plague must have been almost unbearable. Here is interesting. When we think about COVID for a second and our experience with COVID in our lifetime just less than a decade ago, the psychological experience of waiting for COVID, for me personally, I can only speak for me. I was what? I was 16, 17, I think 17. Yeah, 17 when it hit. Like you heard about it. I don't know about you guys, but I didn't think anything about it. I really didn't. I was just like, oh, it's spreading fast. Like, I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to put myself back in my shoes of like when COVID was coming around. If anybody's in chat on any of the platforms, please type what you were thinking when you first heard about COVID back in, what was that, 2022? I'm just kidding. Wait, when did. Yeah, the first lab case was December 19th. And then early 2020 it spread. I have no idea what I was thinking. So 2020, right around this time, it's currently 2026. It was exactly 6 years ago. So I was 16 years old. I had just gotten my license. I was like, fuck, screw that noise, bro. All that noise, like COVID, bro. Just get me off school. I remember when school got off, man. I was jumping up and down. Like, I was really, I thought we had a 2 week vacation. 2 week vacation. That's what I thought it was. Then we didn't go back to school. Now that I think about it, most of that time is just such a blur as well. Wow. I really didn't have a psychological experience of waiting for COVID to come. But at this time, with information traveling slower, I'm going to get off that topic now, guys. I'm like reminiscing about my life, like thinking about what it was existing in the COVID days. I would love to hear from anybody if anyone's around to share what they sort of think about that time. But with less knowledge, less overall knowledge, even though we didn't know anything, less technology, smaller towns, cities. I guess the psychological experience waiting for the plague must have been quite horrifying, especially when you know people are dropping and you have no idea where it's coming from. Even though so for even though so for so long we thought COVID came from a bat or it might have. Listen, guys, I'm not a COVID speaker. I'm not telling you where COVID came from. None of that shit. But I will tell you my experience of when COVID did hit. Oh wait, now we move along here. Let me come on. Perfect. We're gonna bring up this little heat map here. This should help a good bit. So this map shows the plague moving across Europe in stages, with darker and lighter areas marking different years of spread, pointing out how the disease follows ports, trade routes, and major population centers rather than political border lines. So here we go, 1348. We are coming in hot off these coastal cities. Then by 1349, we're moving more inland, coming around the back end. So these were the port cities. Obviously, where most of the trade and supplies and things were coming in. And then it just moves more and more inland. And then here you have the date keys for that. But look at this map and notice the pattern. The disease is not respecting of kingdoms. It is not stopping at borders. It is moving through human connection. Ports light up first, then inland corridors, then wider regions. The plague followed the movement of people and goods not the claims of kings, pastors, or anything of the sort. In some places, mortality may have been around one third. 33% of people in an area could have died. In others, it may have been closer to one half or even higher. There were some areas where over 50% of the population was being taken out. Now, we cannot relate to that. We can relate to some people dying or being taken by COVID, but 50 up to 50, above 50% of the population, that's absolutely wild. If you were living in a house of four and the Black Death hit your city, hit your town, hit your home, statistics say you could kiss half your family goodbye. That's insane. No technology, no knowledge, no idea what germs even are, no hand washing. Supplies are still coming in through the port cities. Crazy. Florence is often described as losing a catastrophic portion of its population. London lost tens of thousands. Some rural communities just completely disappeared from records. In manorial documents, historians can see sudden gaps, tenants dead, holdings abandoned, rents unpaid, labor services disrupted, fields left unused. The whole shebang. So much was wasted. Not wasted. So much was just left behind. So much changed in such a short period of time. The pandemic affected city and countryside differently, but neither was safe. Cities were dense, dirty, and highly connected, which made them, more vulnerable to rapid spread. But rural areas had fewer people, but they were not cut off from markets, roads, travelers, or landlords. Like if the disease wanted to get in and come to them, like the road was built, the road was paved, the opportunity was there, and honestly, nobody was safe. As if you had connection to goods, products, people in any way, shape, or form that you weren't creating, and you didn't live alone on a plot of land somewhere in the middle of nowhere, you were in danger, bro. A village could be hit hard, especially if one infected person or group arrived during the wrong moment. Think about the economic chain reaction, though. If farmers die, grain production fails. If millers die, grain cannot be processed. If bakers die, bread becomes harder to obtain. If carters die, goods cannot move. If priests die, religious services collapse, which was the backbone of all of these towns. If officials die, records stop. If parents die, children become orphaned. If children die, inheritance lines completely vanish and break. The plague was not just killing individuals, it was breaking the connections between individuals. The Black Death was crazy. Many people reacted by fleeing. Some wealthy citizens left cities for country estates. Some clergy stayed with the sick, while others fled. Some doctors refused to visit infected homes. I mean, let me know what you would do, bro. If you hear that something's taken out 50% of your population, are you easily about to go and visit an infected home? I can't blame him for having second thoughts, but listen, a doctor's a doctor. Some neighbors helped each other, others shut their doors. The plague revealed both human courage and human fear, all in this crockpot at once. It showed compassion, but it also exposed selfishness, panic, and complete social breakdown. Everything was chaos. One of the reasons the Black Death became so culturally powerful is that it seemed universal. Death came for the poor, but it also came for the rich. It came for peasants, merchants, monks, priests, children, nobles, everyone. Medieval society was built around hierarchy, but plague made hierarchy look fragile and completely useless, non discriminatory as the plague is, we all know. A lord could command a tenant, but he could not command a bacterium. A bishop could preach repentance, but he could not command the disease to stop. Hey, disease, you stop attacking my village. No. A king could issue orders, but he could not prevent death from entering his court. Like now, factors were coming in play that these individuals and these societal structures were just not used to in the slightest. But now that we have seen where the plague moved, we need to talk about what it did to the body. All right, so we're talking about who was affected, how no place was safe, how it was non-discriminatory, how it attacked through the ports, how it moved inland, all of that. But how did the Black Death affect the human body? Okay, this is where the story becomes intimate and honestly terrifying. One way to make the spread easier for the audience to visualize, all right? So for you guys just to sort of understand, and myself as well, is to think in layers. So first comes the maritime layer. Ships leave infected ports and arriving at new ones. Then comes the urban layer. All right? Dock workers, merchants, servants, and families moving through crowded streets. Then comes the regional layer. Carts, riders, clergy, officials, refugees, and traders carrying news and sometimes infection inland. Finally comes the rural layer. Villages connected to towns through markets, rents, mills, and churches. The plague did not need every person to travel long distances, it just needed one person from each area to find its way to the plague, and then the plague would find its way to everybody else. It only needed enough movement at each of these societal levels to keep the chain alive, which is so, so little, as we know. A sailor might carry infection to a port, a dock worker might bring it into a neighborhood, a merchant might send goods into the inland town, a family might flee to relatives in the countryside, a priest might move from one parish to another. Each individual decision made sense locally, but collectively, those decisions created this continental disaster that is the mass spread of the Black Death. This is also why maps can be misleading. If we read them too simply, the arrows make the disease look clean and direct, almost like an army marching across Europe. It's not the case. In reality, the spread was messy. It moved in pulses, it slowed in winter, and accelerated with movement. Some towns were hit early, some later, some neighborhoods suffered more than others, but the larger pattern remained. Once the plague entered the connected trade system, it could radiate outward with frightening speed. Okay? Just like that. But let's move on to what I was talking about. What the plague did to people. So the Black Death is most often associated with bubonic plague. In bubonic plague, infection usually begins when an infected flea bites a human. The bacterium enters the body and the lymphatic system becomes overwhelmed. A lot of water retention, lymphatic swelling. Think about your lymph nodes just blown up. The famous symptom is the bubo, which is a swollen, painful lymph node, often appearing in the groin, armpit, or neck. These swellings could become a large, dark, and excruciating. Victims could experience sudden fever, chills, weakness, headache, vomiting, dizziness, and absolutely intense pain. In many cases, death came within just days. People who seemed healthy at the beginning of the week could be dead before the weekend. That speed was one of the most terrifying aspects of the entire disease. There were also other forms. Pneumonic plague infected the lungs and could spread from person to person through respiratory droplets. That made it especially dangerous in crowded spaces. Septicemic plague entered the bloodstream and could kill extremely quickly, producing dark discoloration from internal bleeding and tissue death. Medieval observers did not have our categories, but they saw the results: fever, swelling, blood, blackened skin, delirium, and death. Quite the terrifying concoction right there. The name Black Death became attached to the catastrophe because of the darkness associated with the disease and death itself. The phrase captures both the physical symptoms and the cultural memory. To people living through it, the disease looked like corruption made visible on the body. Here we go. Let me get this situated. So this image shows a plague deathbed scene from a medieval miniature. You can sort of, we'll use this, I guess, to shift from maps and statistics to the human scale. We have a sick person in bed, attendants nearby, and death entering the private space of the home. So this is part of the story where numbers are not enough. A pandemic is counted in totals, but it is lived in one room at a time. Imagine waking up with a fever. You hope it's ordinary sickness, then pain begins, then swelling appears. Your family has heard the rumors. They know what the signs may mean. Someone sends for a priest. Someone looks for a healer. Someone says the air is poisoned. Someone says God is angry. Someone says a neighbor brought it. Fear enters the villa before death does. Doctors had very limited tools. Medieval medicine relied heavily on humoral theory, the idea that health depended on the balance of blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Disease was often understood as imbalance. Treatments might include bloodletting, purging, herbal mixtures, diet changes, or attempts to cleanse the air. Some people carried flowers or herbs, some burned incense, some used vinegar, some avoided foul smells, some consulted astrology. It was all over the place. It was all a coin toss, no evidence, no facts. People just went with their gut, literally. To us, many of these treatments sound ineffective, and they were, totally were. Don't get me wrong. But we should understand why they made sense at the time. If you believe disease comes from corrupted air, then sweet smells and smoke seem logical. If you believe the body is out of balance, then bloodletting seems like medical intervention. If you believe the heavens influence the body, astrology seems pretty relevant. People were using the best explanations they had to them, but those explanations did not match the biological reality one bit. So the social pressure inside homes was absolutely brutal. If someone in your home became ill, what did you do? Stay and risk it? Hell no, bruh. Or leave and live with guilt? Care for your parent? Protect your children? Send for a priest, even though the priest might be overwhelmed or afraid? In many accounts, people abandoned the sick, but not everyone did. Many stayed, many clergy served until they died, many family members took enormous risks. The plague exposed fear, but it also revealed true loyalty down to the bare bones. Religious anxiety made the experience even more frightening. In medieval Christian society, dying properly mattered. Confession, last rites, burial in a consecrated ground, and prayers from the soul were deeply important and valued. But the plague killed so quickly. The Black Death killed so quickly and in such large numbers that the normal religious routines absolutely collapsed. They just couldn't keep up with it. Priests could not reach everyone. Some priests died. Some churches could not function. People feared not only death, but death without spiritual preparation. The sound of a city changed. The sound of a city changed completely. Bells rang so often that some places stopped ringing them. Streets had been busy with carts, sellers, student apprentices, and animals. Those grew quieter. People avoided each other. Shops closed. Markets shrank. The smell of sickness and death mixed with the ordinary smells of medieval life. Every cough, every fever, every rumor became a warning to everyone. Yo, Hernandez, what's going on, man? Good to see you too, bro. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a good night. We're just chilling here talking about the Black Death, a pretty intense conversation. Now, as death multiplied, communities faced another immediate problem. What do you do with the bodies when normal burial system just absolutely can't keep up? Like, so many people were dying, they just couldn't keep up at all. The symptoms are important, but the emotional experience is just as important. All right. A medieval household did not have a hospital to call, an ambulance to arrive, or a laboratory test to confirm the cause. The sick person remained in the house, and the family had to decide what to do while nothing but fear, sickness, and despair filled the room. Picture the sequence. All right. Picture this sequence right here. A fever begins. Someone says it may pass. A swelling appears. Someone recognizes the sign from the rumors. The family sends for help, but the healer may already be overwhelmed or entirely afraid to enter. A priest may arrive, or he may be too busy, sick, or dead himself. The neighbors hear. Some avoid the house. Others whisper. The household becomes marked. In a close community, disease changes social identity almost instantly. One day you're a neighbor, the next day you're a stranger, the next day your doorway is a warning. Okay? That kind of fear damages trust, as we can all infer, obviously, right? If a stranger coughs, you move away. If a relatives arrives from you, if a relatives arrives from another town, you wonder where they've been. If a servant becomes sick, The household fears contamination. If a landlord demands labor, peasants may refuse. If authorities order gatherings for prayer, people may fear the gathering itself. The plague turned ordinary human contact into a possible threat, and that is one of the deepest psychological wounds a society can experience. And this is something we can speak about directly. We can talk on this subject. Let me say that one more time. The plague turned ordinary people and ordinary human contact into a possible threat. And that is one of the deepest psychological wounds a city can experience. Point blank fact. And we all experienced that same exact shit with COVID. No doubt about it. We were all psychologically cooked. We all got psychologically cooked after that. You don't hang out with people the way you used to. You don't talk to people the way you used to. You don't. And all of the world was restructured. But moving on, we have burial chaos, mass graves, and archaeological evidence. In ordinary medieval life, burial was not just a practical act, okay? It was a spiritual and communal one. The dead were prepared, mourned, prayed over, and buried in churchyards or consecrated ground. Families remembered them through masses. Sorry, I'm so tired, guys. I'm trying to get through this. I'm having so much fun. I'm just tired, and I feel it in my voice. Families remembered loved ones through masses, anniversaries, and local memory. Death had ritual structure. The Black Death overwhelmed that structure. Too many people died far too quickly. Graveyards literally filled up. Priests could not perform every rite. Gravediggers died or fled. Coffins became scarce or unnecessary. In some places, bodies were collected by carts and carried to pits. Individual burial gave way to emergency burial. The dead were no longer always treated as individuals in the ordinary way. They became a mass crisis and a direct depiction of that. Here, next image. So this miniature shows citizens of Tournai carrying plague victims for burial, while clergy stand, there nearby. This shows exactly how normal funeral systems broke down under the weight of mass death. This is one of the most important visuals for understanding the Black Death. It does not show one funeral, it shows repeated death, bodies carried together, clergy present but overwhelmed, a city trying to preserve ritual while the scale of mortality makes normal ritual almost impossible. For medieval Christians, this mattered deeply. Burial was not simply disposal, it was tied to salvation, dignity, community, and memory. To be thrown into a pit without a full ceremony could feel like a second tragedy on top of the death itself. Okay? Families lost not only loved ones, but the ability to properly mourn them the way they had been used to. Modern archaeology has confirmed that mass burial was not just a literary exaggeration. Excavations have revealed plague burial pits and emergency cemeteries. Archaeologists study skeletons, burial positions, age patterns, diet, trauma, and DNA. These discoveries bring us closer to the people behind the written records. Here, look at this. So this archaeological image shows skeletons in a plague mass grave. I want to use this to remind you that these were real people, not just medieval numbers. Each skeleton was once a person with a family, a routine, and a life interrupted by epidemic disease. They were just like us, and they're experiencing something that we actually are the first generation or the first period of people in a very, very, very long time to be able to feel this somewhat and to relate to some extent. So the physical evidence matters because written sources can be emotional, religious, political, or exaggerated, but bones are different. They do not tell the whole story, but they anchor the story in reality far more than anything else does. In some plague graves, bodies were placed carefully. In others, burial patterns reflect speed and pressure, most likely due to the number of individuals. Either way, the graves show communities struggling to respond to death at a scale they could not manage. One major scientific breakthrough came from ancient DNA. Researchers can sometimes recover pathogen DNA from human teeth because the bloodstream leaves traces inside dental pulp. When scientists tested remains from plaque cemeteries, they found evidence of Yersinia pestis. That helped confirm the biological cause of the Black Death. So, here we go. So, this microscope image shows Yersinia pestis glowing under fluorescent stain. The disaster changed kingdoms, economies, religion, and art, but the cause was literally microscopic, as you can see. This image is a turning point in how we understand the story. Medieval people saw swelling, fever, blackened skin, and death. They saw families collapse and cities empty. They saw bodies in pits. But what they could not see is this right here, this microscopic image. The real agent was microscopic. The old world was being shaken by something literally invisible to them. That invisibility is part of what made the plague so terrifying. When people cannot identify the real cause of suffering, they search for meaning, you know? Sometimes that search produces compassion, sometimes it produces reform, but sometimes it produces panic, extremism, and violence. The Black Death produced all of those responses or consequences or actions or realities. The burial scenes also remind us that Black Death created a crisis of memory. Normal burial practices helped communities remember individuals. A named grave, a prayer, a family plot, a ritual procession. All of these say that a person mattered and belonged. Mass burial throws all of that out the window and it does something completely different. It protects the living and handles the emergency, but it compresses many individuals' lives into one collective trench, you know? That is why modern archaeology is so powerful here. It restores individuality to people who were swallowed by mass death. When scientists examine skeletons, they can sometimes estimate age, sex, health, stresses, injuries, diet, and burial position. Even without knowing names, we can see that these were not abstract victims. They were children who had not grown up, workers whose bones show labor, older adults who had survived earlier hardships, and communities buried together because the living had run out of time. So, the medieval scale of emergency burial and the modern scale of investigation, it's crazy. In the 1300s, the goal was to bury quickly. Today, the goal is to understand carefully. Both are human responses to the same catastrophe, separated by centuries, technology, knowledge, um, and just information in general. When the plague struck, many Europeans interpreted it through religion. Of course, very normal back, especially in 1300s. If the disaster came from God, then the answer had to be repentance. 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 Communities organized prayers, processions, fasting, confession, and act of public devotion. People asked what sin had brought such punishment. They looked inward, but they also looked outward for someone to blame. Everybody always wants to blame someone else. One dramatic religious response was the rise of flagellant groups. Flagellants traveled from town to town, whipping themselves publicly as an act of penance. They believed that by punishing their own bodies, they could help turn away divine wrath. In a world full of fear, such performances could appear powerful and urgent. Here's a depiction of them. So this woodcut shows flagellants using whips as a public act of penance. So explain that. That explains that these groups believed their physical suffering could help atone for sin and persuade God to lift the plague off of the people around them and themselves. Look at the energy of this image. The body becomes a religious message. This is not even a private prayer, it's a public suffering. To frighten township people, flagellants may have looked like holy warriors against divine anger. To church authorities, they could look dangerous because they operated outside normal religious control. Eventually, the church condemned many flagellant movements. So these were brought to an end. People stopped whipping themselves, I'd assume. Sorry, crack my back. Oh, 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 I should have put the mic there. That was a wow. I needed that one so bad. The flagellants show how disasters can weaken established authority. If bishops and priests cannot stop the plague, people may turn to alternative spiritual movements. Fear creates fear creates space for radical responses. And when fear becomes intense enough, it can also turn against vulnerable communities. The darkest social the darkest social response to the Black Death was scapegoating. Jewish communities in parts of Europe were falsely accused of poisoning wells or deliberately spreading the plague. These accusations were entirely unfounded, but they became deadly. Jewish communities were already vulnerable minorities in medieval Christian Europe, often facing legal restrictions, economic resentment, and religious hostility. Okay? During the plague, old prejudice turned into violence. Some people were tortured into false confessions, rumors spread from town to town, homes were attacked, communities were burned, expelled, or destroyed. One of the most infamous massacres occurred in Strasbourg in 1349, where Jewish residents were killed even before the plague had fully struck the city. That detail is important because it shows the accusation was not based on evidence. It was based on fear, hatred, politics, debt, and the need for scapegoating. So many similarities with that today. So many similarities there. Wow, that is like wildly similar to what we see today. Let me get this up for you guys. There we go. So this image shows anti-Jewish violence connected to Black Death persecutions. Handle this, quite seriously. Jewish communities did not cause the plague. They were victims of both the disease and the panic-driven hatred. This is a wild and pretty painful image. It belongs in the story because the Black Death was not only a medical disaster, but it was a moral disaster. Disease killed millions of people, but fear and hatred killed innocent people as well. Public health crises often reveal whether a society turns toward truth and protection or rumor and blame. Human nature, my bet is on rumor and blame. The medical responses were also desperate. Some physicians recommended bloodletting, some used herbs or poultices, some advised people to avoid bad air, some studied the SARS, some suggested carrying sweet smelling flowers. None of these approaches stopped the disease, but they show the human refusal to do nothing. Even ineffective remedies can feel emotionally necessary when alternatives are completely helpless. The failure of medicine, government, and even religious rituals to stop the plague had long term consequences. People did not simply stop believing overnight, and medieval society did not instantly become modern. But trust was shaken. Authority had been tested and found limited. The trauma entered memory, preaching, literature, and especially art. Similar to what we're experiencing in modern times today with the COVID looming in our recent past. It is important not to flatten the religious response into one simple story. Many people responded with sincere faith, charity, and courage. Some priests, monks, and nuns cared for the sick at great personal risk. Some communities organized prayers because prayer was the deepest language of hope they possessed. For many people, religion was not a side issue, it was the structure that gave all of death and their existence meaning. So at the same time, crisis can push religious feeling into dangerous territory. When people believe a disaster, especially such a horrific one, is divine punishment, they may search for sins to punish, outsiders to blame, or dramatic acts to prove repentance. That is where fear can become performance, and performance can become pressure. A town watching flagellants march through the streets might feel inspired, but it may also feel accused. If you are not joining, are you part of the problem? In this atmosphere, public emotion can become contagious in its own way. You know, that's interesting thought. Really, two sides to every story, moment, and experience. The scapegoating of Jewish communities shows the worst version of the process. A false explanation can feel comforting because it gives, fear a target, but the target is innocent. Once rumor becomes accusation and accusations become violence, the original disease crisis becomes a human made atrocity. This is one of the reasons the Black Death remains morally important, not just medically important. Let's move on to how the plague changed art and imagination. So, after the Black Death, European art became more intensely focused on death, judgment, decay, and the fragility of life. But of course, medieval Christianity had always thought deeply about death. But the plague gave those themes a new sense of urgency. Artists and viewers had seen mass death up close. They had watched rank and wealth fail to protect people. They had watched bodies pile up. They had watched beauty and youth disappear in a matter of days. One major artistic theme was the danse macabre, or dance of the death, or dance of death. In these images, skeletons or personified death lead people from every social rank toward the grave. Pope, emperor, king, noble, merchant, peasant, child. The message is clear: death equalizes everyone. Earthly status is temporary. Everybody has their time coming for them. Everybody will die. And here's that. Here to look at that real quick. This dance of death image, shows skeletons interacting with the living. I'm going to use it to explain the medieval message. Death comes for every rank, from the powerful to the poor, and no one can bargain their way out of mortality. Sooner or later, everybody will be here. It's like pulling her arm, like, come on, it's your time. She's like, no, not yet, not yet, not yet. But he's like, yeah, it is. Yeah. So, oh man, my just apologies. The Dance of Death is almost like a visual sermon. It tells the viewer, do not trust power too much, do not trust wealth too much, do not trust youth too much. Every person is moving toward the same end result. After the Black Death, the message was not abstract, it was recent memory. Everybody was very clear on this. Another powerful image tradition is the triumph of death. The most famous example is Peter Bruegel, the Elders painting from the 1500s, more than 2 centuries after the first wave of the Black Death. Even though it was painted later, it reflects the long cultural memory of plague, war, famine, and mortality. Here's that. While I try to fix my eye. So this painting shows a landscape overrun by skeletons and death. I want to point out the chaos. Armies of skeletons, fires, bodies, traps, and people from different classes unable to escape this this end result. Spend a moment looking at the chaos in this painting. Death is not a single figure. Death is an army. It overruns feasts, armies, lovers, peasants, nobles, and musicians. The world itself looks broken. This is how plague trauma became visual culture. People painted not only what happened, but what it felt like. The sense that death had taken command of the landscape is crazy. Ugh. Skulls, hourglasses, wilting flowers, rotting fruit, extinguished candles, and bones became reminders of mortality. These are called memento mori symbols, reminders that life is short and death is certain. They were not merely decorative, they were moral and spiritual warnings. The plague also pushed art toward more realistic engagement with suffering. Viewers did not need idealized scenes alone, they needed images that recognized pain, fear, and death. Art became one of the ways Europe processed collective trauma. It gave visible shape to invisible fear. The artistic response also gives the audience a way to feel the aftershock of the plague. Art does not only record what happened, it reveals what people could not stop thinking about. Before the plague, medieval art already included death, judgment, saints, martyrdom, heaven, and hell. After the plague, mortality became more immediate and more democratic. Death was no longer only a theological idea, it was a neighbor, a smell, a cart in the street, an empty chair at the table. That is why images of skeletons, graves, corpses, and judgment became so resonant with society. These works are not simply gloomy, they are philosophical. They ask, what remains when rank disappears? Right? What does wealth mean when the body fails? What does power mean when a king and a beggar enter the grave the same way? The plague made those questions absolutely unavoidable. When you show like when you look at these images, like we are here, I want you to sit with them and just think about it a little bit. Like every this situation put everybody on the same level. One of the most important literary responses to the Black Death came from Giovanni Boccaccio in Florence, Italy. His Decameron begins with his Decameron begins with a description of the plague in Florence, then follows 10 young people who flee the city and tell stories in the countryside. They tell 100 stories over 10 days. That framing matters. Boccaccio does not ignore the horror. He begins with it, but he also shows people responding to horror by telling stories. The Decameron is full of humor, desire, intelligence, trickery, morality, criticism, and ordinary human behavior. It is a work about life continuing in the shadow of death. There we go. So this manuscript image shows Boccaccio and Florentines who have fled from the plague. Um, People leave the infected city and create a temporary community through storytelling. So this image is perfect because it shows a different kind of response from panic or violence, which is good to see. These people are not whipping themselves or searching for scapegoats. They are creating distance, order, conversation, and culture. The act of storytelling becomes survival. The Decameron also reveals the weakening of old assumptions. Boccaccio often presents clergy as flawed, hypocritical, or comic. He shows merchants, women, servants, and ordinary people with intelligence and agency. In that sense, the book belongs to a changing world. It is still medieval, but it points toward Renaissance humanism, a stronger focus on human personality, experience, wit, and social reality. The plague did not create Renaissance by itself. History is never that simple, but it helped destabilize old systems and made people more aware of the fragility of life. When death is everywhere, the value of life becomes sharper. Art, literature, money, labor, and social mobility all changed in the aftermath. Oh, guys, I'm sorry. I gotta say, man, my eyes are like closing like this. I'm just so tired. I'm so tired. I've been staring at this computer screen for over 12 hours straight. Um, yeah. So now we're going to dive into one of the most important long-term consequences, labor. This is obviously one of the most important consequences of the Black Death, labor. The Black Death killed so many people that surviving workers became more valuable. Before the plague, many peasants had limited bargaining power. Land was controlled by nobles and landlords. Labor obligations were tied to custom and status. In many regions, peasants owed rents, dues, and work services. But after the plague, that balance flipped upside down and kind of changed a little bit. um, One second, sorry. So, if half the workers in an area died, landlords still needed fields planted, crops harvested, animals tended, mills operated, and rents collected, right? Surviving laborers could demand better wages or better terms. Landlords hated this. Governments tried to freeze wages and force laborers back into old conditions, but the reality had changed. Labor was scarce. This is very similar and relatable to work from home COVID restrictions. When COVID was phasing out and offices were like, "All right, work from home is over. We're all going back to the office." The people were like, "The fuck are you talking about? This is what we're used to now. Like this is the new normal." And for the most part, there's still a lot of work from home, honestly, especially compared to pre-COVID levels, right? So it's interesting to think about that. Governments, they tried to freeze the wages and everything, but the reality had changed, man, for good. Labor was scarce, point blank, period. In England, the statute of laborers attempted to restrict wages after the plague. Laws like this show us that elites understood the danger. They were not only worried about death, they were worried about social power shifting downward. Workers who had once been replaceable were suddenly nearly impossible to replace. So this tension helped contribute to later unrest, including the English Peasants' Revolt in 1381. That revolt had multiple causes: taxes, war, labor restrictions, resentment, and demands for change. The Black Death was not the only cause, but it was part of the background. It altered the labor market forever and made the old forms of control so much harder to maintain. There you go. So this image shows the death of Wat Tyler during the English Peasants' Revolt in 1381. You can connect the plague's labor shortage to later social conflict over wages, taxes, and freedom from old obligations through this image right here. This is where the Black Death changes from a story about disease into a story about power. The old order depended on predictable relationships, lord and tenant, priest and passioneer, master and servant, ruler and subject. The plague disrupted those relationships. When people died, land opened. Wages rose, inheritance shifted, wealth concentrated among survivors. Some families improved their position because they inherited property from dead relatives. Some workers moved to places offering better terms. In Western Europe, serfdom weakened over time. That does not mean peasants instantly became free and prosperous, but life was a little better. It still remained hard. Elites pushed back. Poverty remained real, but the demographic shock gave many ordinary people some leverage that they had not previously possessed. So anything is something when you had nothing. The church also suffered heavily. So many clergy died that replacements had to be found quickly, sometimes with lower standards of education. People had watched priests die, processions fail, and prayers go completely unanswered. The church remained powerful, but its aura of certainty was damaged, definitely. In the long run, skepticism, toward institutions helped create conditions for later transformations, including reform movements and eventually the Reformation. The Black Death also affected consumption. With fewer people, there could be more land or goods per survivor in some regions. Diets improved for some, wages rose for some, clothing, housing, and social expectations shifted. A catastrophe that killed millions also unintentionally created new openings for those who remained alive and lived. That is one of the most disturbing truths of history. Disaster can destroy and redistribute at the same exact time. Now, out of this experience, one of the most important public health ideas in the world history began to take shape: quarantine. Ugh, that word gives me the heebie jeebies. The economic consequences also unfolded over generations, not overnight. Immediately after the plague, many regions faced confusion. Farms were abandoned, rents went unpaid, and estates lost workers. Some landlords tried to convert land from crop production to pasture because sheep required fewer laborers than grain farming. In some places, this changed local economies and landscapes. Everything turned upside down. Survivors could sometimes negotiate better conditions, but that did not mean elites accepted the change like so peacefully and willy nilly. Laws restricting wages were attempts to force the old world back into place. Those laws reveal anxiety at the top of society. If laborers could move, bargain, and refuse old obligations, then the social hierarchy was no longer as stable as it had seemed before. This is a strong point to make, right? The Black Death did not automatically make Europe modern, but it accelerated tensions that were already present. Money economy, urban growth, legal change, peasant resistance, and landlord pressure all existed before the plague, but the pandemic intensified them. It made the contradictions sharper and harder to manage in day-to-day life. Medieval people did not understand bacteria, as we talked about earlier, but they did notice the disease moved with people and ships. Some cities began experimenting with isolation. The most famous development came from the Venetian world. Authorities required ships, crews, or travelers suspected of carrying disease to wait before entering the city, aka quarantine. The word quarantine comes from the Italian idea of 40 days. So the logic was simple. Even without germ theory, if sickness appears after contact, then delay contact, right? If ships bring disease, hold ships away. If sick people spread danger, isolate the sick people. These measures were imperfect, but they were a major step toward organized public health. Let me get this up for you. So this image shows Lazaretto Vecchio, one of Venice's quarantine islands. This is how isolation became a public policy. Ships, goods, and six people could be held apart to protect the city. It's just a funny looking little thing. Look at this image and think about how important the idea is. This is not just a building, it represents a complete shift in responsibility. Disease is no longer only a private spiritual problem or a matter of individual fate. It becomes something a city can manage through policy, isolation, observation, regulation, and controlled movement. Quarantine did not end the plague. Europe continued to experience plague outbreaks for centuries, but the idea of public health had begun to develop and move forward. Governments learned that ports, borders, hospitals, burial practices, and movement controls mattered, which is huge. The Black Death forced authorities to think about population level protection. This is one of the few constructive legacies to come from the catastrophe. Out of mass death came new administrative habits. Cities began to track disease, regulate ships, inspect travelers, create pest houses, and build lazarettos. Modern public health is much more advanced, but the basic principle is still recognizable. When disease spreads through contact and movement, organized society must respond with coordinated measures. So the Black Death did not simply end in 1351. It continued to echo. It changed labor, art, literature, religious trust, public health, and social imagination. We should also give credit to the practical intelligence behind quarantine. These officials did not know about Yersinia pestis, but they recognized patterns. They saw that ships from infected places were dangerous. They saw that delay could reduce risk. They saw that separating the sickness from the healthy might protect the city. That this is the beginning of public health thinking. Not perfect knowledge, but organized action based on observed risk. Right? Public health always involves a tension between movement and protection. Ports want trade, merchants want speed, cities need goods, sailors needs work, but disease control requires delay, inspection, and sometimes isolation, baby. The Venetian response shows that medieval governments were capable of administrative innovation when survival demanded it. For viewers today, quarantine is a familiar word, but in the plague era, it represented a major conceptual shift. Disease was becoming something a government could manage through rules, space, timing, and enforcement. That's completely foreign to them, brand new. That foundation did not eliminate fear or suffering, but it created a foundation for later health systems. So today, plague is no longer the unstoppable terror it was in the 14th century. Antibiotics can treat plague if caught early. Public health systems can identify outbreaks, trace contracts, control animal reservoirs, and warn communities. But Yersinia pestis still exist in some of the wild rodent populations around the world. The bacterium is not gone. What changed is our understanding and our ability to respond to it. With modern science has allowed us to revisit medieval history with new tools. Ancient DNA from teeth, archaeology from burial grounds, climate studies, trade history, and close reading of manuscripts all help us reconstruct the pandemic. The Black Death is now studied by historians, archaeologists, geneticists, epidemiologists, economists, art historians, and literary scholars. It is one of those events that requires many fields because its effects were so wide and blanketed. The biggest legacy is not only that many people died, the bigger legacy is that Europe changed because so many people died. The labor shortage weakened feudal obligations, wages shifted, land use changed, the church's authority was damaged, art became more obsessed with morality, literature captured human behavior under pressure, governments began experimenting with quarantine, survivors inherited property, moved for better work, questioned old structures, and lived with trauma. Did the Black Death cause the resistance? No, not by itself. The Renaissance had many causes: urban wealth, classical learning, patronage, trade, politics, and intellectual change. But the Black Death helped clear space for transformation by destabilizing the old order. It forced people to confront mortality and human agency. It made the present feel urgent. It reminded Europeans that institutions could fail and that life could suddenly change, move on, and prosper. That is why this story still matters to this day. The Black Death shows us that disease is never only biological. Disease moves through social systems, it follows trade routes, it exposes inequality, it tests trust, it triggers blame, it changes labor markets, it alters art, it forces governments to act, it completely reshapes memory. When we look back at the 14th century, we should not see medieval people as, distant or foolish. We should see human beings facing a disaster with very, very, very limited tools. Okay. Intense fear and deep, deep, deep uncertainty. Some responded with courage, some cruelty, some with prayer, some with flight, some with art, some with policy. Their world was different from ours, but the human questions are familiar. What do we do when normal life breaks? Who do we protect? Who do we blame? What do we believe when institutions fail? And how does society rebuild after loss? Tonight, we traveled from peaceful fields to Mediterranean ports, from trade routes to deathbeds, from mass graves to microscopes, from flagellants to pogroms, from plague art to Boccaccio, from labor shortages to rebellion, and from quarantine islands to modern science. The Black Death was one of the worst disasters in European history, but it also became one of the greatest turning points. It destroyed millions of lives, yet it also changed the structures that shape the future. As we close on this portion of the stream, I just want to say I had a lot of fun talking about this today. This is an incredibly powerful story. And the Black Death is just one of those things that, since we just spoke about it, since we just brought this scenario up, it's one of those topics where you're just, I'm gonna be thinking about it for days, like definitely days. I'm going to be thinking about the social, cultural, economic, personal impacts, the impacts on families, the impacts on people who were alone at the time. There's just so much to think about. This is such a multi-page story. There's so many different components that build up into this one massive event that changed the course of history, the course of the current, and everything, and influenced how we acted today. The quarantine, us quarantining during COVID, only came about because of the Black Death. Think about that. It's very cool. That's a fun fact that you can tell people, which I guarantee you many would not know at all. Anyway, the Black Death. So that is where we end that portion of the stream. That was an absolutely just fascinating topic, to be honest. That was a fascinating topic. If anybody's watching the VOD right now, we don't have to, I think we have like 3 people live. To everyone watching live, if anybody is, thank you so much for coming. And joining me on this historical research quest. I had an incredible time today. I can't wait for the next one next week. And you're all legends, to be honest. Like, that was awesome. If you're watching the VOD, I really hope you enjoyed this. This was our longest historical research quest yet. Oh, yeah. But now we're going to move away from that, and we're just going to open up some chess and play some games. I'm going to keep thinking about that. Black Death. Isn't that just such a crazy topic? Run. Oh, honestly, was very fun. We about to come and play some chess. All right, let's play a little bit of chess. Anyway, yeah, that's it for the stream. That's it for the historical research quest stream. We're gonna play chess for like a solid, I don't know, like 25 minutes, 30 minutes. Let's see what we got here. I kind of want to put some music on, but I can't do it in this tab. Whatever. Let's just play. All right. All right. We got a game moving. We got a game. I have no idea what I want to do. So we'll see if I can lock in. I'm only 591 elo right now. Let's see what this guy wants to do. Hmm. Oh, I have a good play here. I have a good play here. I think. Oh, he countered it well. He countered it. He countered it. Oh, I could win the battle there. No, I don't want to do that. I don't know why I did that. I should have moved pawn to b3. Yep, that is exactly why. Fuck. All right, let's sacrifice. Because we can. Okay, that's fine. Which one should we do? Okay, fine. We'll do this. Okay. Let's start mapping out our next plan here. I gotta move my little queen. Or should I move it? Because I'm gonna take there. I guess I'll just go right here. Yeah, this could be good. I like our dispersion versus his. You know, that was just a wildly interesting move there, to be honest. I don't know if I love it or if I hate it, what he just did there. I know I'm risking, but seems worth it in my brain. You'll see why in just a second. Watch this. If he makes a blunder here, I'm going to move to a3 with my bishop. And then he has nowhere to go. Even though it's just a bish trade, but still. I'll take a bish trade every day of the week. Okay. I'm safe there, right? Yeah. Am I safe there? I should be. Ooh! 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 Let me tell you why I think that was a weird ass move by him. I'll go for the trade. I'll bite. I have better positioning. This is like watching two of the dumbest people on the planet play. I fear. Come on. Let me get him over. I can probably make this guy run out of time, to be honest. We'll see though. Never want to speak too early. First game on in literally probably over a year. Yep. Now watch this, ladies and gentlemen. I don't got no type. Bad bitch is the only thing that I like. That's right. What the heck? Did he just surrender? Haha! Estupido. Estupido body. All right, now I just gotta not lose. Oh, I can't do that. Where'd he go? Oh, what are you gonna move? Oh, wait, what did you just take? Oh, I missed it. 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 All right. All right. What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I doing? What am I actually doing? Yeah, come on. All right. Stop playing around now. What am I doing? Wait. What was I actually doing? What was I actually doing? Okay, we got one back at least. Yeah! I just lost. I just lost. I just lost. Yo, I just lost. It's all about time now. Yo, I actually just lost. I gotta win on time. I gotta win on time here. Come on. I can't believe I just lost this game the way I did. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, that's it. We're done. Yeah, sure. Whatever though. I'm never playing chess again. That's on God, bro. I'm never doing that again. I'm never doing that to myself again. Thinking my ass can just get back on like willy nilly. Come on. Who am I kidding? Where's my stream though? That's what I'm looking for. Oh, here it is. Found it. Hey, we got that money. Okay, everybody. I thank you so much for joining me on this wonderful stream today. I'm exhausted. I have to go to bed. We lost that game of chess in an embarrassing fashion. The historical research quest stream was incredible. I hope you all have an amazing night. Thank you so much if you're watching, or if you did watch, or if you're watching the video recording back. You guys are the best. Keep an eye out for USA 250 Digital Impact Network, and we'll be in the pipeline soon. Everybody have a great night. Peace.